The room was dimly lit, with only the soft hum of the air conditioner breaking the silence. His touch was warm and gentle, his hands exploring parts of me that had felt numb for years. My breath caught as his lips brushed against my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I wasn't supposed to be here doing this, but the thrill of excitement drowned out any feelings of guilt. "I've never done this before," I whispered, my voice trembling with anticipation. He smiled, his eyes confident, and leaned in closer. "Relax," he whispered, his voice smooth and soothing. "Tonight's about you. Let me take you back to where it all started. I'm just a regular woman, living a comfortable but predictable life with my husband, Alex. We've been married for nearly 10 years, and while Alex is a great guy, our relationship has become routine. The passion was gone. Then came that night out with my girlfriends at a wine bar in downtown LA. We were sipping Pinot Noir and chatting when Jessica asked, 'Have you ever been with someone from a different culture?' The room fell silent, and then we all burst out laughing. Jessica was serious, though. She told us about her experience and how it was the most passionate night of her life. I tried to brush it off, but her words stuck with me. That night, lying in bed beside Alex, I couldn't shake off the thought, what if? Weeks went by, but the idea lingered. I found myself noticing black men more often, at the grocery store, the gym, even on TV. It was as if my mind had opened a door that I couldn't close. Then I met him, Mark, a marketing expert who worked with my company. From the moment we met, I felt an undeniable attraction. Mark was tall, with smooth, dark skin and a captivating smile. His presence was commanding, and his deep voice sent shivers down my spine. Our initial conversations were professional, but there was an unspoken connection. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a meeting, Mark lingered in the conference room. "You're different," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. I laughed nervously. "Different how?" "In a good way," he replied, his gaze unwavering. My heart racing, I excused myself, feeling both thrilled and terrified. The encounter replayed in my mind for days. I knew I was taking a risk, but the excitement was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I decided to take another step. I sent him a text. "Hi, hope your day's going well." His reply came instantly, and soon we were texting daily. Our conversations became more personal, more suggestive. He made me feel seen, desired, and appreciated. When Mark suggested meeting for coffee, I couldn't resist. The day we met felt like stepping into another life, one where I wasn't just a suburban wife, but a woman chasing the thrill of the forbidden. I chose a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table, his presence impossible to ignore. "You look stunning," he said, standing as I approached. His words sent a warm flush through me. We talked for hours, our conversation flowing effortlessly. Mark had a way of making me feel at ease, his voice laced with charm and intelligence. But beneath the surface, I knew that our connection was more than innocent. "So tell me," Mark said, leaning forward with a sly smile. "What made you decide to meet me?" Mark asked, his eyes piercing through mine. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. "I think you know why you're here," he said, his voice low and smooth. His words struck a chord, and I felt my heart skip a beat. I had crossed a boundary, and now I was teetering on the edge of something unpredictable. That night, I couldn't shake off our conversation. Mark's words lingered in my mind, stirring up emotions I couldn't ignore. I knew I should pull back, but the thrill of the unknown was too alluring. When Mark texted me again, I responded without hesitation. Our messages grew more frequent and intimate. He'd send me compliments that made my pulse quicken, and I found myself constantly checking my phone for his messages. "How about dinner?" he suggested one evening. I agreed before I could think of an excuse. The restaurant was cozy and upscale, with soft candlelight and whispered conversations. I wore a dress that made me feel confident and beautiful. Mark's eyes lit up when he saw me, and he greeted me with a warm hug. "You look stunning," he said, his voice sincere. Dinner was perfect, delicious food, fine wine, and an undeniable chemistry between us. By the time dessert arrived, my defenses were crumbling. "To be honest," he said, his hand touching mine, "I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since we met." My breath caught, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. The intensity of Mark's gaze, the warmth of his hand on mine, was almost too much to bear. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered more to myself than to him. "But you are," he said, his voice a gentle reassurance, "and that tells me everything." That night, as I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Guilt, excitement, fear, and desire all collided, leaving me breathless. I knew I was on the brink of something that could change everything, but instead of turning back, I found myself craving more. The text came late one Friday evening. "What are you doing right now?" I stared at the screen, my heart racing as I tried to think of an appropriate response. Alex was upstairs in the den, probably falling asleep in front of the TV. I could hear the faint sound of a football game and the occasional clink of his beer bottle against the coffee table. Nothing much. "You?" I replied, trying to sound casual, though my palms were sweating. "Thinking about you?" Mark responded. 3 simple words that made my stomach flip and my pulse race. Before I could overthink it, another text appeared. "Let's meet." I hesitated. This wasn't coffee or dinner, this was different, and we both knew it. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, my mind battling between guilt and desire. Finally, I typed back, "Where?" The place he chose was discreet, a small bar tucked away in a part of town I rarely visited. I told Alex I was meeting an old friend for drinks, a lie that rolled off my tongue far too easily. As I walked into the bar, Mark was already there, leaning against the counter with an air of confidence. His smile lit up the room, and I felt my knees weaken. "You're here," he said, his voice low and husky. "I shouldn't have come," I replied, but the words felt empty. He echoed his previous words, "But you did." And I felt my defenses crumble. We slipped into a secluded booth, the dim lighting wrapping around us like a secret. He ordered drinks, but I barely touched mine, my senses overwhelmed by the tension between us. I finally admitted, "I can't stop thinking about you," my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's hand reached across the table, his fingers grazing mine, sending shivers down my spine. We left the bar together, the silence between us speaking volumes. My heart pounded as we walked to his car, fear and anticipation warring within me. "Are you sure?" he asked, his tone gentle but serious. I nodded, my voice trapped in my throat. The motel room was a blur of nerves and excitement. As he closed the door behind us, the weight of what we were about to do hung in the air. Then he stepped closer, his hands cradling my face, and kissed me. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and intoxicating. I melted into him, guilt and hesitation dissolving in the heat of the moment. His touch was assured and intimate, as if he knew exactly what I'd been craving. "I've wanted this for so long," he whispered against my lips, his voice sending tremors down my spine. "Me too," I confessed, my voice barely audible as he trailed kisses down my neck. The rest of the night was a haze of passion and exploration, each moment surpassing the last. He was everything I'd imagined, attentive, skilled, and relentless in his pursuit of my pleasure. It was as if he'd unlocked a hidden part of me, and I surrendered to the experience completely. As I lay beside him afterward, my body still humming from the encounter, a mix of emotions flooded me. Guilt lingered, but it was overshadowed by a deep sense of satisfaction and liberation. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, his voice gentle as he gazed at me with concern. "I am," I replied, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. The morning after my night with Mark, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. It was Alex, my husband. "Good morning, babe," he said cheerfully. "You didn't stay out too late, did you?" "No, not too late," I lied, glancing at Mark, who was still asleep beside me. My voice was steady, but my heart was racing. "Great." I made some coffee. "See you when you get back," Alex said before hanging up. I stared at the phone, the weight of my actions bearing down on me. But when I looked back at Mark, his peaceful expression and the gentle rise and fall of his chest filled me with a complex mix of emotions. I slipped out of the motel quietly, promising Mark I'd text him later. The drive home was a blur. The streets were slowly coming to life, and the morning sunlight seemed to cast a judgmental glare. When I walked through the front door, Alex greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, oblivious to my secrets. I forced a smile, determined to bury my guilt and pretend everything was normal. But my life felt like a facade. The days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. I went through the motions of being a devoted wife, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't shake the memory of Mark's touch, his captivating smile, and the way he made me feel alive. Before long, I found myself reaching out to him again. One text led to another, and soon we were secretly meeting whenever we could. We were careful, always choosing secluded spots and covering our tracks. Mark was respectful, never pushing me but always available when I needed him. The secrecy was exhilarating, but it also took a toll. Juggling my double life was draining, and I found myself entangled in a web of lies. "Where were you?" Alex asked one evening when I came home late. "Traffic," I replied, trying to sound convincing. I forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant. "You know how traffic gets," I said. Alex nodded, accepting my explanation without question, but the guilt still gnawed at me. Each lie felt like a tiny betrayal, a small crack in the facade of my perfect life. The guilt was a constant companion, a quiet voice in the back of my mind. But every time I thought about ending things with Mark, the memory of his touch, his passion, and his love pulled me back in. "You're addicted," I told him one evening as we lay tangled in the sheets of another motel room. "You're worth it," he replied, his hand tracing lazy circles on my back. As I navigated this double life, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep up the charade. Would Alex start to notice the changes in me? The newfound confidence, the sudden bursts of happiness? And yet, I couldn't stop. Mark had awakened a part of me that I didn't know was missing. The first time I almost got caught was a wake-up call. Or at least, it should have been. It started like any other rendezvous with Mark. We had planned to meet at a boutique hotel a few towns over. I told Alex I was meeting a colleague for a work project and even packed my laptop to make the alibi convincing. "Don't stay out too late," Alex said as I kissed him goodbye. "You've been working so hard lately." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. His kindness made the lies sting more than usual. The hotel was secluded, quiet and upscale, a setting that eased my guilt, if only slightly. Mark was waiting, his presence as captivating as ever. "You're a sight for sore eyes," he said, pulling me into a kiss as soon as we were inside the room. The hours we spent together were intoxicating, a whirlwind of passion and laughter that made me forget the life waiting for me back home. But as the sun began to set, reality intruded. "I should go," I said reluctantly, pulling away from Mark's embrace. "Stay a little longer," he murmured, his lips brushing against my neck. "I couldn't," I said, even as my resolve weakened. As I drove home, my mind replayed the day's events, a turbulent mix of euphoria and guilt. I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't notice the car following me. It wasn't until I turned into my neighborhood and saw the headlights make the same turn that I realized something was off. My heart racing, I pulled into the driveway and watched the car slow down before speeding off. Was it just a coincidence, or had someone been watching me? Inside the house, Alex was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "You're back earlier than I expected," he said, glancing at the clock. "Yeah, we wrapped up sooner than I thought," I replied, forcing a smile. As I set my bag down, my phone buzzed with a text from Mark. "Did you make it home safe?" I quickly silenced the phone, my hands trembling. "What's wrong?" Alex asked, noticing my fidgeting. "Nothing," I said, grabbing a glass of water to steady myself. "Just tired." That night, I barely slept. my mind racing with the events of the day and the unsettling feeling of being watched. The car, the text, and the lies swirled together, fueling a storm of paranoia. Had Alex suspected something? Was the car following me just a random stranger, or something more ominous? The next morning, I woke up to find Alex staring at me, a peculiar look on his face. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Of course," I said, forcing a laugh. "Why wouldn't I be?" "You've just seemed different lately," he said, his brow furrowed. "Distracted." My stomach dropped, but I quickly recovered. "Work has been stressful," I said, hoping the excuse would suffice. He nodded, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't entirely convinced. I tried to distance myself from Mark after that close call, but it was easier said than done. Every time I tried to end things, he would remind me of how good we were together, how alive I felt when I was with him. "You're overthinking," he said during one of our phone calls. "No one suspects anything." But I wasn't so sure. The paranoia lingered, and I found myself jumping at shadows, constantly checking my phone, and second-guessing my every move. In the next chapter, I'll share how I finally decided to take control of the situation, or at least, I thought I did. But things didn't go as planned, and the lies I'd built my double life on began to unravel. Mark and I took extra precautions, meticulously selecting our meeting spots and using a secure messaging app. But despite our discretion, the weight of our lies began to bear down on me. I'd catch myself staring at Alex during dinner, wondering if he could see right through me. One night, as we watched a movie, he paused the screen and asked, "Is everything okay with us?" My heart pounded as I forced a smile. "Of course," I said. "Why do you ask?" "You've just been distant," he replied, his eyes searching mine. "If there's something wrong, you can tell me." His words cut deep. Here was the man who had stood by me through everything, offering me unconditional love, and I was betraying him. "I'm fine," I said softly, reaching for his hand. "I promise." But even as I spoke, I knew I was lying. The next time I saw Mark, I couldn't shake off the guilt. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. His smile faltered. "That doesn't sound good." "It's not," I admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can't keep doing this." Mark sat beside me, his expression unreadable. "Why now?" he asked. "Because it's not fair," I said, my voice cracking. "Not to Alex, not to you, not to me. This was never supposed to go this far." Mark nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "But that doesn't make it any easier." "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. He reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek. "Don't be," he said. "What we had was real, even if it wasn't meant to last." As I distanced myself from Mark, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I refocused on my marriage, determined to mend the cracks that had formed. I planned romantic evenings, cooked Alex's favorite dishes, and made a conscious effort to truly listen to him. For a time, it seemed to work. The distance between us began to close, and I felt a renewed connection. Yet the weight of my guilt persisted. One evening, I decided to confront my emotions by writing down my story. This wasn't about seeking forgiveness or justifying my actions. It was about confronting the secrets I'd kept hidden. That's why I'm sharing my story with you now. I'm not asking for sympathy or understanding. I know my actions were wrong, and I live with that knowledge every day, but I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others who may be struggling with their own secrets and desires. Thank you for listening. If you found my story thought-provoking, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. Your support means a great deal to me. Remember, the most difficult truths to confront are often the ones we hide from ourselves. I'd catch myself staring at Alex during dinner, wondering if he could see right through me. One night, as we watched a movie, he paused the screen and asked, "Is everything okay with us?" My heart pounded as I forced a smile. "Of course," I said. "Why do you ask?" "You've just been distant," he replied, his eyes searching mine. If there's something wrong, you can tell me." His words cut deep. Here was the man who had stood by me through everything, offering me unconditional love, and I was betraying him. "I'm fine," I said softly, reaching for his hand. "I promise." But even as I spoke, I knew I was lying. The next time I saw Mark, I couldn't shake off the guilt. "We need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. His smile faltered. "That doesn't sound good." "It's not," I admitted, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I can't keep doing this." Mark sat beside me, his expression unreadable. "Why now?" he asked. "Because it's not fair," I said, my voice cracking. "Not to Alex, not to you, not to me. This was never supposed to go this far." Mark nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I knew this day would come," he said quietly. "But that doesn't make it any easier." "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. He reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek. "Don't be," he said. "What we had was real, even if it wasn't meant to last." As I distanced myself from Mark, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I refocused on my marriage, determined to mend the cracks that had formed. I planned romantic evenings, cooked Alex's favorite dishes, and made a conscious effort to truly listen to him. For a time, it seemed to work. The distance between us began to close, and I felt a renewed connection. Yet the weight of my guilt persisted. One evening, I decided to confront my emotions by writing down my story. This wasn't about seeking forgiveness or justifying my actions. It was about confronting the secrets I'd kept hidden. That's why I'm sharing my story with you now. I'm not asking for sympathy or understanding. I know my actions were wrong, and I live with that knowledge every day, but I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others who may be struggling with their own secrets and desires. Thank you for listening. If you found my story thought-provoking, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to this channel. Your support means a great deal to me. Remember, the most difficult truths to confront are often the ones we hide from ourselves.